you,
And maybe you can't hear me because you're in your breakout room, or excuse me, maybe you can't respond.
oh, hi, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, I just wanted to see if you may give me permission to record one more time.
All right. Looks like I did. Do you not see it?
Okay, perfect, I do, yeah, just making sure. Thank you, sorry.
Yeah, no, all good.
Just so you guys all know, we're live on Facebook right now. It's
all right,
5:30.
we're live on Facebook. Thanks, Colin. I think with that, let's go ahead and get started and stream the program. If anybody needs anything, feel free to communicate via chat. I'll be available after my intro slides. Webinar has started. So Ava, this would be where you can go ahead and click record.
This meeting is being recorded.
Nice, thank you. Welcome, everyone. We're going to give it just a minute to let folks join us. Thank you all for being here. For those of you who are entering our webinar, if you want to drop in the chat where you're joining us from, or if there's something that you really want to learn today, I would love to hear from you. San Jose, great. Milpitas. Willow Glen. Wonderful. Thank you. Again, we're just going to give it about a minute or two just to let folks trickle in. Again, thank you for being here. Wow, people from all over the South Bay. Campbell, Morgan Hill, great. Thank you all. We are excited to talk about graywater reuse and rainwater collection today. We're about 2 minutes after 5:30. As folks continue to join, we have a lot to cover, so I figure I might as well go ahead and get started and introduce us. Again, thank you all for being here. My name is Liz, and I am the program manager for Daily Acts. We are here via partnership with Valley Water and a number of different experts, and we're going to talk tonight about graywater, rainwater, and opportunities for water conservation and reuse. Before we do get started, you all may notice that this program is being translated. On the bottom of your screen, you should see a globe icon that suggests that you choose your respective language. So if you have not already, please go ahead and choose the language that is needed for you and click mute original audio if you are going into a translated breakout room. All right, so really briefly, I want to share a little bit about the organization Daily Acts. Again, my name is Liz and I am the program manager. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with Daily Acts, we are a small and mighty environmental education nonprofit that's based in Petaluma and mainly working throughout Sonoma County, but partnering beyond. And we are primarily working to be able to provide people with the knowledge, skills, and resources to be able to live a rich and full lifestyle while having a smaller environmental impact. So Daily Acts typically is working hard to connect people and build community through our educational programs, our action campaigns, and by influencing policies that address the climate crisis and work to create a livable future for all. We've been around for about 20 years now, and our impacts have been far and wide. And I really cannot emphasize enough how grateful we are for the partnerships that we've made along the way, and for all of you that continue to show up to our programs and believe in the power of your daily actions. For this evening's program, you may realize we are in a webinar format. So in order to interact with tonight's event, please use the Q&A box if you have any questions that come up during the program. We will be saving all questions until the end. If you want to interact with the panelists, share resources, or engage with anybody else who is on this presentation, please use the chat box and make sure that it is being sent to either the panelists or to everybody, depending on who you want to communicate with. Again, please just be sure that questions are dropped in the Q&A so that nothing gets missed in the chat. And truly, this program could not be made possible without the partnerships that we have. So I want to give a super special thank you to the entire Valley Water team, and specifically also to Alan with Bay Maples, who will be leading tonight's presentation. Before we get started on the content, I want to pass it over to Phil with Valley Water to highlight some of the rebates that the Valley Water office offers.
Yeah, thank you, Liz, and hello, everyone. As Liz introduced, my name is Phil, and I am a water conservation specialist with Valley Water. And we are very excited to offer this program in partnership with Daily Ag and our city forest. And a bit about the agency of Valley Water. We are a special district water agency that provides 3 core services for about 2 million people who live and work here in the South Bay Area. We are the water wholesaler, and we work in partnership with 15 local cities and 13 local water retailers to provide safe, clean, reliable water, flood protection, and creek and stream stewardship for our community here in Santa Clara County. Water conservation is essential for ensuring a clean and reliable water supply today and into the future. And I want to thank you all for joining us to learn more about how you can improve your water efficiency and reduce water use on your landscapes through graywater reuse and rainwater collection. So now I just have a few quick slides about our graywater rebate program before passing it off to Alan, who will go into greater detail about graywater systems. So as I said, the Valley Water, our agency, offers rebates to all residents within Santa Clara County. And the rebate is specifically for a graywater laundry to landscape system. This system is the simplest to install, the cheapest, and the easiest to maintain, just due to the fact that you don't need any permits. There's no, you're not adjusting like any existing plumbing. So that's why we promote this as our program for this laundry landscape system. As I said, it's the cheapest, it's the simplest, and it's just a great resource to reuse graywater into your landscape. For the rebate, the standard rebate is $200 for an installed system. We don't need any receipts or anything like that. And we also do cost share with a few local cities, a few local agencies who add in an extra $200 for the residents in their areas. And those cost sharing agencies are the City of Cupertino, Milpitas, Morgan Hill, Palo Alto, and customers of San Jose Municipal, not San Jose Water Company. Those two are frequently mixed up. But so if you live in any of those, if you're a customer of any of those agencies, then you would receive the $400 rebate. The overall steps to apply for this rebate program is you would want to, first of all, prepare and plan. Our website has a lot of great resources, presentations, previous video recorded workshops that you can take advantage of and learn all the ins and outs of what the system entails. We also do have a list available of landscape professionals who have worked through our various conservation programs, including Graywater and the landscape rebate program, which is another one of our fantastic programs we offer rebates for. But to add to that, we do not recommend or endorse any individual contractors or products. So when you're preparing to see if this system would be right for your home, there are a few quick questions you'd want to ask yourself and go through. And a few of those include, is the washer located near an exterior wall or above a crawl space? If, for example, if your washer is in the middle of your home and far away from the area you want to landscape, then that might not be the easiest system to set up. The landscape where you're diverting the water to should be at the same elevation or downhill from the washing machine. And the first mulch basin, which we will go into details a little later on, should be within 50 feet of the washing machine, because this system relies on the pump of the washing machine and gravity to direct the water out there. So if you're going too far, it could strain the washing machine. Next up, you want to make sure that you do have the appropriate types of plants that you would be irrigating with the gray water from your washing machine. Trees love gray water. The you do want to make sure you're using certain soaps, but the nutrients in there do really help certain trees, shrubs to really thrive. The main thing that you want to avoid, that you should not do, is irrigate any type of root crops, anything where the gray water would come in contact with the crop that you'd be growing. And also, it is not suitable for grass. For this type of system, it's basically a drip system. So there's no, you don't hook them up to your pop-up sprinklers or anything like that. And the last thing would be that you can't have any of the mulch basins closer than 1.5 feet away from the property line, because one of the requirements per the California Plumbing Code, which allows these systems to be installed in residential homes without the need for a permit, the water produced, the gray water produced on your home needs to stay on the property. So just, you can't have it run off into your neighbor's property or run off into the sidewalk, anything like that. So if you can say yes to all those questions for your property, then this really is a great resource that you could take advantage of. And to do that, there is an online application process where you tell us information about your property, your laundry habits, and once your system, or once your idea has been approved, you go ahead and basically install a project. You can do it by yourself. This is a very good kind of DIYer type project, or you can hire contractors. And once the project is complete, everything's installed, we are able to do a virtual post inspection where you would upload various pictures that basically prove that you installed it correctly, you did all the requirements, and we're able to use those to complete that post inspection. And after that, everything's approved, you get the rebate check. And so it's pretty simple process. And yeah, so next slide, please, Liz. Okay. Oh, sorry. Could you back up one? I actually didn't realize you're on that one. So this image here is an example of a system, a graywater system installed for the laundry machine. Some of the essential components you can see include a diverter valve, which is right located near the washing machine there, and that essentially gives you control over sending the water out to the landscape or to the sewer. And after the diverter valve, the piping exits the home, and there is a air vent, which is there to prevent back siphonage. That air vent can be located inside near the laundry area or outside, just kind of depends on the situation of where it's being installed. And once the pipe exits the home, again, just depending on the system, you can have it slope along the side of your home, or you can have it like vertically drop down into the landscape. And that's where it switches to the flexible tubing, the irrigation tubing. And you kind of snake it through your landscape, and you have these branch tees, which then feed the water into the mulch basins. And the mulch basins are essentially like dugout trenches in the area of the root zone of the plants and trees that you want to irrigate. And those trenches are then filled in with mulch, and they basically act as a big sponge, and the water absorbs into that area, and the roots of those plants and trees drink up the water from there. Each of the outlets has a valve box and a cover, and this essentially gives you direct access to where the water is feeding into the basins. And you can just take the cover off, verify that the water is running, lets you check for clogs, and that's essentially it. And next slide, please. Okay, so the last quick slide I have here for you is about our a portion of our landscape rebate program, which covers rainwater capture. So rainwater capture is a very resourceful system to capture rainwater from a roof and implement it into your landscape when you need it. Using this water is a great way to irrigate your landscape without having to use potable water. Rainwater capture is just one of the various elements of our landscape rebate program. And the other portions include like irrigation equipment upgrades, like irrigation controllers, pop-up sprinklers, valves, everything like that, and also landscape conversion for taking out your grass and putting in low water use plants and mulch. But for the rainwater capture, we offer rebates for up to, or it's a flat rate, $35 per rain barrel. And for cisterns, we offer 50 cents per gallon of storage that they're capable of. And we also do some cost sharing for this program as well for our cost sharing agencies. All rainwater capture projects must submit an application first, receive approval in the form of a notice to proceed. Just like the Graywater, you got to apply first. You know, we got to check to make sure that you're following all the requirements, and then we give you the approval. And yeah, and that's all I have. And I'll be passing it over to Alan next.
Hello, my name is Alan Hackler from Bay Maples, Wild California Gardens, and I'm really excited to present tonight to everybody. Thank you for taking time to attend this Zoom meeting. And I am a licensed contractor and certified Graywater installer. I went through the Graywater certification process through Graywater Action back in 2010, taught by Laura Allen, which is a really fantastic program. If anyone out there is interested in learning more, I really encourage them to seek out some of the classes that Graywater Action puts on. And so the focus of tonight's talk is going to be, first we're going to talk about Graywater, and then as time permits, get into as much rainwater discussion as possible. I do have a lot of slides that I want to get through. I'll do my best to get through them in a timely way, but make sure I cover as much information as possible. So our time is a little bit limited, so I'm going to jump right into it. And let's see, here we go. Okay, so what is Graywater? So Graywater is going to be any lightly used household water.
Alan, I don't mean to interrupt, but we actually cannot see your share screen yet.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so
No
sorry.
worries.
I don't know why it defaults, but it goes away. Okay, so can
There we
everyone
go.
see that?
Good to
Okay, I apologize. It's only my first slide, so don't miss anything. So what is Graywater? Graywater is lightly used wastewater coming from your laundry machine, your shower or bath, and bathroom sink. Currently, kitchen water is considered black water, which I do hope that changes in the future because it will make a lot more gray water available to use in our garden. But currently, kitchen water is considered black water, and your toilets are also considered black water. So the main focus of our discussion is going to be dealing with laundry water and bathroom water. So the current law for gray water was adopted in 2009, and it was a change to the Chapter 16 of our plumbing code. And what the change in plumbing code allowed for was simple systems like laundry machines don't need a permit or an inspection, and pump systems or branch drain systems from a shower and sink are easier to permit. So it just kind of opened up the door to allowing more people to install various types of gray water systems in their homes. So that was really the major change that allowed gray water to be much more common in the state of California. And some of the other details of the law, you can't have any kind of cross connections with a potable water source. You can't hook it up to any kind of a hose or your existing potable drip irrigation system. You must discharge all gray water subsurface over a layer of mulch. You must incorporate a three-way valve, which I'll explain in more detail later. And a three-way valve basically enables you to switch from a sewer to your gray water system. You cannot use gray water irrigation in any kind of overhead spray system. So typically what you'd see in a lawn, you're not going to use gray water for that for a host of reasons, which we'll talk about later on. And you cannot use gray water to irrigate root crops, which are radishes, carrots, onions, basically anything that grows subsurface that you would eat. So there are two major types of gray water systems. You're going to have laundry systems and you're going to have bathroom systems. And the beauty of a laundry system, like we mentioned, there's no permit, very low cost, do not require extensive plumbing and irrigation knowledge. It can be done with someone who has fairly limited experience and is kind of a DIY with a little bit of homework. So it's one of the reasons why I really encourage people to try to tackle this themselves or have maybe a friend give them a hand with this, but it's a fantastic way to, incorporate a very sustainable addition to your home and save water. And in bathroom systems, we'll talk about second. Those do require a permit or can be a little bit more expensive, do require some plumbing and sewer modifications, and should definitely be done in conjunction with a licensed contractor or plumber. And we'll get into more detail. So let's jump into it so L to L is just a short acronym for laundry to landscape systems. They require a three-way valve, which you can see in the picture to the right. And also so there's two major components. You have the interior plumbing portion of it, which happens near the washing machine. Then the second major portion of an L2L system is going to happen out in your landscape with mulch basins. So those are the two major components. And so this is what you are going to typically see in a system that does not have a graywater system. So this is what just your typical home looks like. The picture on the left is what the plumbing looks like before the drywall has been installed. And the picture on the right is what you see after the work has been done. If you look behind your washing machine, you see your hot and cold line. And the black line is basically the drain line coming from the washing machine, which then goes into your standpipe. And so the major change that you're going to be making when you're doing a laundry to land system is taking that standpipe that you can see here on the left and tying that standpipe into a three-way valve, as you can see there on the right. So you're basically, one of the reasons why these systems don't require a permit is you're not actually making any kind of permanent modification to your plumbing system. All you're doing is modifying your drain line. And this can cause a bit of confusion with some even contractors and plumbers, because they like to go and change the standpipe, which is the pipe that's in the wall. And so it's really important to know that you're just changing the drain line in the back of the machine. And as you can see in the picture to the right, the drain line gets hooked up to a three-way valve, which then, can people see my cursor when I move it over the screen?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, great. So I'm gonna use my cursor just to kind of point out as the things that I'm explaining. So you have your drain line coming up into this three-way valve right here, which allows you to connect back to your sewer if you're using things like bleach, or there's other grease or other things in the laundry loads you don't want going to your graywater system. You can turn the handle to always revert back to existing sewer. And then this side right here is going to be the connection to your new graywater system. And then this little guy right here is what's called a auto admittance valve, which is a fancy way of saying an anti-siphon valve. And what this does is, if you look at the standpipe before it was converted to a graywater system, the standpipe just sits there loosely. And the reason why it sits loose is it's creating an air gap so the water can't siphon back into your machine. And so this little auto vent right here above the three valve is serving that same function. So just make sure that you can't siphon gray water back into your machine. And you'll see some more pictures of that too. Here is another version of that same configuration. This version is just done with a polyethylene pipe and fittings, and it doesn't require any glue. So it's a little bit more of an ecologically appropriate material to use. Some people like to cut down on using PVC glue, which is kind of a toxic chemical, and cutting down on PVC. So here's just another option. But the same basic concept. You can see your drain line going into your three-way valve with your bypass to the sewer, and then your line going out to the garden. And depending on how your machine is configured and where it's configured, in these two scenarios, the outlet's going through the floor space and then or the crawl space, and then outside, sometimes it'll go directly horizontally through the drywall and stucco and going outside into the garden. So that's all going to vary site to site. And this is just another picture of the glueless option. If you don't want to use PVC glue, just use this compression fitting. So I like to just show people this option. So I get this question a lot from people interested in doing these kind of systems: is how much water are you going to, how much water does your washing machine use, and how much of it can be diverting to your landscape? And it can vary quite a bit from the manufacturer, if it's a top loading or front loading machine, what your settings are on. Are you setting on a low, light load, medium load, or heavy load? So those are all going to change how much water is being produced. Most manufacturers do not list how much water their machines use, but these are some rough ranges of water usage. So an older top loading machine, if you're doing anywhere from 2 to 4 loads a week, you could be using upwards of 8 to 10,000 gallons or more of water per year. So that's why it is a fantastic way to cut down on potable water and utilizing this water in your garden. Front loading machines are a little bit more water efficient, which is great, but this means you're going to use a little bit less gray water in your garden, but still a fantastic way to utilize that water. And so here is a close-up again of the 3-way valve. So if you notice in this picture, this is a 3/4 inch 3-way valve. Depending on if you have a newer machine or an older machine, the newer machines will have a 3/4 inch drain pipe, which means that some of the plumbing components you purchase will be 3/4 diameter fittings and T's and 90s and pipe. An older machine, which can be 1 inch, you're going to be using primarily 1-inch components. But this diagram just shows you how you can just very easy to turn the handle if you are using bleach or other products that you don't feel like you want to use in your garden. You can switch it over. And so products you want to soap products you want to avoid are things that have phosphates, sulfides, bleach, and boron. Typically, anything that's going to be a powdered soap is going to have a lot of salt and boron in it, so you want to avoid that. Usually, a Graywater compatible, biocompatible soaps are going to be clear and are going to be liquid. And nowadays, there are a lot of options for these kind of soaps. So I'll show you some examples of it later on. So that's kind of the plumbing portion of a Graywater system. I'm going to kind of also touch on some of the irrigation side. So one thing to remember is a great lawn landscape system is not going to function like a typical drip irrigation where it's going to come on at a set time every morning and it's going to come out small little emitters. You're basically going to be using this water to irrigate typically shrubs and trees, and you're going to basically be building mulch basins around these trees. And I like to think of it as basically a small leach field around each tree that you're irrigating. And you're going to be digging a mulch basin that's almost like a little moat around the side of it. And the point being that the mulch is basically the filter in this system. There's no other filter by the wash machine or in the irrigation. So basically, as the water comes out of the machine, it's going to go directly into the garden with no filtration of any hair or lint. It's all just going to get managed in these mulch basins. And mulch basins are preferred material because they have large spaces in between each particulate of mulch, which allows for the water to percolate into the ground. It allows an area for microbes to break down the particulates and soak into the ground, and basically acts as a living mulch and a living filter. I'm not going to get too into soil types just for today's talk, just for time. But more or less, when you're considering how big to make your mulch basins, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. Just to simplify it for the sake of our discussion here, the more clay-based soil you have, the larger of a mulch basin you're gonna create, because the water is going to percolate more slowly into the ground. The more loam and sandy your soil is, you can get away with a much smaller mulch basin because the water will percolate into the ground much quicker. So that's basically kind of a rule of thumb when you're deciding how big should my mulch basins be. And if you look in this picture, just on the left-hand side right here, you can just see how this is just nearly all clay right here, which is going to be very, very common in Santa Clara Valley and the Bay Area in general. So it's almost impossible to dig a mulch basin too big around it in our area. So when you're going through, this is kind of how I would start with digging a hole for a tree. This is the outlet cover. So if you notice, there's just a little ball valve here. We use the ball valve to sort of, because there's no way to really regulate which tree gets more water or less. Typically, if left unchecked, the plants in the beginning of the run will get more water. So we typically put a little ball valve like this with the purple back on it right here to designate that it's a reclaimed water source, it's non-potable. And then you put this little mulch basin cover, and what this does is it helps to keep roots from growing up the pipe. And this is typically what you'll see after the mulch basin is created. This was sort of this mulch basin actually was designed not to water like one specific tree, but water. They had a variety of small perennials growing around here, and they wanted to be able to kind of give all these a little bit of water. So what we did is we kind of dug our mulch basin sort of around these other plants, so that way the gray water will be able to irrigate a larger variety of plants. So for the most part, it's going to be much easier to water a small handful of larger shrubs and trees than it is going to be to water, several dozen small perennials. Just based on the fact that you're digging these small little mulch basins, it's just a much easier way to configure the drip tubing or the poly tubing in your gray water system. And so this is another thing to point out here in this picture is not only is this little mulch shield keeping roots from growing in here, it also allows there to be, it's a little bit difficult to see in this picture, but from where the outlet of the gray water coming out right here to where this mulch is in this picture, it's probably about 10 inches. And that is another way of keeping the roots from growing up into this line. I've seen many times where there is, and actually it happens a lot, we get critters that will they're looking for water, especially little gophers or whatnot, and they'll dig around the mulch base covers, and then all of a sudden this whole area gets covered in soil, and then roots will back up into it. It's actually a lot more common than I had ever imagined, but we're seeing it quite a bit. So it's really important to maintain these little mulch basin covers, pull out any mulch or debris or sediment that builds up over time. So you want to check this. I would say at least every few months, it's good to check on your mulch basins to make sure they're working properly. And also gives you a chance to adjust the little ball valve outlet to either increase or decrease the amount of water coming out of that particular mulch basin outlet to make sure that each plant is getting significant or the equal amount of water. And this is just, this one, I like to include this one because this actually shows a little mulch basin cover that was made out of an old 1 gallon pot. Actually, I like using 5 gallon pots. It gives you a little bit more room. So just another way you can add another sustainable aspect into your material choices. So if you're able to utilize, an old plastic pot like this, you're saving a little bit of money on the project. You're keeping some material out of the landfill, and you're purchasing, less plastic produced materials. And so some of the pros of a launch and land system is they're very simple, very easy, can be installed in, 1 day, maybe a day and a half if it's just your first time. A lot of water reuse, a lot of payback for very little initial input. So those are some of the pros of a system. Maintenance, I recommend you should at least check your system once, twice a year. This can be done in, maybe a matter of 30 minutes, opening up each mulch basin. You can flush out your gray water line. I didn't include a picture of it, but there are ways where you can you shouldn't permanently leave it connected, but you can have a temporary hose connection that can then flush out your main pipe that leads your laundry machine. It's really important that you don't leave that permanently connected because you don't want to have any potable water cross connections. But just as a way to flush your laundry line, that is a recommended maintenance task. Making sure there's enough mulch around the trees, making sure your throw-away valve is in the correct position. If you have it in a sewer position, thinking you're irrigating your system, you want to make sure it's in the correct position. And I've had people have gray water systems that they installed, never touched it for 10 years and still working perfectly fine. That's not always the case, but I just use that to emphasize that I don't want people to think that's going to be a big maintenance hassle to have this system in. You can have a perfectly functioning gray water system with very, very minimal input and maintenance requirements. So soaps, whenever you are choosing soaps, you typically look for something that's going to be clear and liquid. That is a good sign. It doesn't have a lot of dyes and additives. Usually boron is used in bar soaps, which helps to kind of solidify the material to kind of create that bar soap. So liquid soaps are usually going to be your best bet. These are some really common ones that you can find. Nowadays, you can go to even Safeway or Walgreens or Costco. Most all those places have a pretty wide variety of different options that will work perfectly fine in your gray water system. What plants are good for gray water systems? I typically encourage people to irrigate edible trees and shrubs because you're just getting that much more benefit and payback from a graywater system. Because if you can be saving water and repurposing or reusing your water, but also getting some food out of it, irrigating habitat trees, creating shade value, those are all just additional secondary benefits. So why not be able to eat some food from the graywater that you're setting up to your garden? But it doesn't mean you can't. There's a whole host of other plants that will work perfectly fine. But I typically try to stay away from small perennials. Usually trees and shrubs are going to be your best bets. Also, those plants don't mind having their feet wet because your graywater is going to get a little bit of water every time you do a load. If you're doing anywhere from 2 to 3, as much as 4 to 5 loads a week, a lot of these trees are going to have consistently wet roots. So typically trees and shrubs, especially edible trees, don't mind having that extra water. And it just usually means that you're producing that much more fruit from those trees. So that's my recommendation in terms of what kind of plants you can select. But there are many plant choices. There are very few that I would say you can't use for graywater. I would say things you want to stay away from would be maybe really acid loving plants. Some graywater appropriate soaps are going to be a little more on the basic side of the pH scale. So that would be the one caveat I would say in terms of picking what plants to water would be stay away from plants that are really highly acidic. Also, if you've got your prized, heirloom tree or heirloom plant that you're very concerned about, or it would be heartbreaking if that plant were to die, maybe that'd be the one plant you decide to not use for graywater, just to be on the safe side, because most gardens are going to have more plants available to irrigate than they can water with graywater systems. So if that were the plant you decide not to use, that's a perfectly fine way to select your plants. I hope I'm not going too fast. I'm trying to cover a lot of material here, so I'm doing my best. If there's anything that I glance over too quickly, we can definitely cover some more at the end in our question period. So I'm going to go through a quick little, okay. So one of the things that I think most people are going to find most challenging with graywater systems are, once you have gone, if you've seen the pictures in the beginning of my slides, a laundry machine is going to be next to an exterior wall. And I think the scariest part for most people is drilling that hole through the wall. And then once you've gone through that wall, you're ready to put your pipe in, you're like, darn it, there is a concrete pathway from between the house and my garden. How do I get my pipe across? I want to point out the pipe exiting the stucco wall, that was not done by us. We usually drill a much cleaner hole there, but I like using this picture just because it shows the cut in the concrete. I should change this probably for as many times as I've done this talk, but that's besides the point. So when you're looking at this, or when you are getting your pipe from the exterior wall into the garden space, you have 3 basic options. You can either cut either the concrete, brick, or stone patio. You can go over the top of the patio, or you can trench underneath it. And they all have their own pros and cons. It's cheapest to go over the top of it, but it can be also a tripping hazard. But if it's in a part of the house that is not a high trafficked area, that might be a perfectly suitable solution to go over the top. If you have the inclination, you can definitely cut the concrete. And this is an example that we've done where we've just cut the concrete with a concrete saw. I think this is a picture right here, one of my guys just cutting it with a concrete saw. If you do not own a concrete saw, you can go and rent one from a local tool rental yard, or Lowe's or Home Depot also rent one for you too. This is probably the most difficult part of the system for most DIY people. And this isn't going to be a problem with everyone's configuration of the house. Every house is a little bit different, but I would say in at least 3/4 of the projects that we come across, there's usually some type of hardscape to navigate around. So it's always good to have a plan for this, and you can decide what is the best technique for you. Maybe this is the one portion of the project. If you got that construction guy who lives down the street, or handy family member, or a strong child in your family who you could talk into trenching or doing some work, is a great way to get someone else involved. But yeah, so just something to consider when you're doing these systems is how to navigate around the concrete or stone. Okay, so that's enough of that. And so this is another picture too after that garden was done. The client had some rock on site, so just use some simple rock. Another way you can use reused material just to cover the concrete hole, the concrete cut. You can also add some more concrete and patch it up. You can put in soil, mulch, a whole bunch of different ways you can backfill after you made your cut. So this is, I'm going to walk you through another little how-to to dig your hole for a mulch basin. So hole's been dug, have our tree kind of spot in the middle to make sure our mulch basin is large enough. Then we kind of tease the roots a little bit, mix it in with some of the native soil, still keeping enough room around the edges to backfill with mulch. And then here is our mulch with our reused 1 gallon pot mulch basin cover. Can't quite see the pipe, but it's coming out just right here. So just giving you another example of a mulch basin. And here's just another avocado tree. Next, you see here we have this is the main tree that we intended to irrigate, and just some peripheral plants are on the side, just to take advantage of the extra water. And you can see here there's a whole network of different mulch basins. The main pipe kind of runs right here to the center, and then it just tees off into each one of these trees. I thought I had a picture of it before it was covered, but it showed the pipe, but I might have deleted it. I was trying to streamline my photos for this presentation. I already had way too many. So this is basically the pipe comes up from the top corner here, and it comes out right below the mulch, and then it tees off to each one of these fruit trees. And this is a typical amount that you might get to. So in this particular project, we were able, there's one more plant just off picture here. I believe we were able to get 7 fruit trees total. But this is a kind of a small garden, so we kind of combine it to a small area. But I would say a typical lawn landscape system, you're going to be able to irrigate anywhere from 4 to 5 if you're only doing a couple loads a week. If you have a family, a larger family, and you're doing a lot of loads, you can maybe irrigate as much as 8 to maybe 10 trees, especially if you have an older top loading machine. You could probably even do more than that. So, but one thing to remember is most, or more or less all washing machines are going to have about 50 feet of pumping capability. So it's going to be able to pump 50 feet of a distance from the machine to the farthest point of your graywater system. That's really important to remember that and make sure you apply that to your irrigation system, because going more than 50 feet will begin to put strain on your pump. And also remember, your pump can only pump 3 feet vertically. So if there is a slope to your backyard, if your backyard is a little bit taller or front yard is a little bit higher than the location of your washing machine, you want to keep that in mind, because instead of going that full 50 feet, you may only be able to get away with maybe 40 to 35 feet or so if there's a slight grade change. So the more the grade change goes up, the less distance away from the machine you can pump. I hope that all makes sense. If people want more clarification, I can kind of go over that in more detail when we answer some questions. But just keep in mind, 50 feet is sort of the rule of thumb that you don't want to go any further than that. And that's 50 feet of pipe distance. So if there's a lot of turns and bends in it, it's not really 50 feet as the crow flies. It's 50 feet of actual distance of pipe. So that's an important thing to remember as well. Another thing that the plumbing code requires is to have something on site that lets people know that there is a graywater system in place in the home. So you can go online. Yeah, I think even the Valley Water District has a template form that you can download. It just has some really basics about how to turn the machine on and off, what kind of soaps to be using, what kind of things to avoid. So that's a really handy thing to have in place, especially if you live in a household with more people, or there's renters who also use the unit, or kids as a reminder. So you always want to have some kind of a graywater manual. And also it's really, and I should have mentioned this in the slide where I showed the 3-way valve, is you want to label the 3-way valve. So the 3-way valve is 2 positions. It's going to have a sewer position and a graywater position. And you want to put a little reminder on there so people know what it is. Sometimes if you're looking at the handle of a 3-way valve, it's not always clear what direction it's pointed in, and also what direction is that handle, what is it designating to go to. So labeling it can be key. You can never label it too much. So cost of a system. So it can vary quite a bit depending on who's installing it. me as a licensed contractor, I've got quite a bit of overhead with employees and workers' comp and payroll taxes, et cetera, et cetera. So for my cost is going to be a little bit more than maybe your average DIY person or kind of a handyman type service. So you know so the price range is going to vary quite a bit, but I would expect to pay between $1,800 to $3,500. $3,500 cost range is going to be more if there is some kind of hardscape modification required. So if there's like some concrete cutting, or you have to lift up some flagstone or move some things around, or there's extensive trenching, that's when it's going to be a little bit closer to the $3,500 range. But your typical handyman, or even someone on the Graywater Actions recommend installers list, which I really recommend people look at to find a local person. If they're a certified installer, but maybe not a licensed contractor, their costs can be a little bit less. So look around, get different prices. But I really do encourage people to do a little homework and try to tackle this system themselves, because you will get more value out of this system, especially if you're applying for the rebate. The rebate can cover nearly all the material cost, and then the labor is free because you are the laborer. So I recommend maybe someone taking one of the hands-on training classes after they watch this presentation, and then they get some hands-on experience, and then feel free to tackle it themselves. And I think it's even a better way to do it is get some friends and family members and do it together, and you guys can almost like each help each other to install a system at each person's house. So you get a little extra help doing it.
And I will say, like I'm saying here, saves and shares are some of the most important metrics on Instagram. So everyone knows that Instagram and all these social media.
Is that okay? Everyone hear me okay now? I've got a little crosstalk there. Sorry about that.
All good.
Yeah, so but these are very rough costs. I don't want to get too much into cost of things, but I just want to give people an idea, because people always wonder what these things cost. Here are some resources. Don't worry about writing these down, because Liz is going to send out some resources. I can send this out to people as well. We'll also make this whole presentation available to download and take home with you, or have reference to it. But don't worry about writing all these down. But these are all really fantastic resources. They're all located in the Bay Area for the most part. We have the water district on there for the rebates, some different places where you can buy parts, buy soaps, get more information. So these are all fantastic people who've been promoting Graywater for a very long time. Please support them, and so on. Okay, so now we're going to shift over a little bit from laundry systems to bathroom systems. And there are two major bathroom systems. You're going to have a gravity type system where the water from your bathroom's shower and bath and bathroom sink. Well, I couldn't put that there. I apologize. Is going to gravity feed into your backyard. And the more advanced way is having a small pump, basically a little sump pump with a filter and a float switch will then send the water out. So those are two different types of bathroom systems. So I'm going to first start out with a branch drain system. And a branch drain system is basically going to be an extension of your existing ABS pipe that's under your house. You're typically going to use 1.5 inches is the most ideal, 1.5 inches or 2 inches, depending on what the existing pipe is in your home. And you're going to modify. And with this type of system, unless you're a very advanced DIY person with some plumbing experience, I would absolutely make sure you have a plumber help you with this portion of the project. This is the plumbing under your house. So similar to what we saw with the brass through-way valve behind your washing machine, you have a similar concept on your house. You have this is either going to be a 2-inch or a 3-inch three-way valve. It's basically going to be the same type of three-way valve you see for a pool or hot tub scenario. And this just gets used as the diverter valve for your ABS pipe under your house. And you notice this is in a crawl space under your house, which most people are never going to even want to go under or switch to use. You can buy an electronic actuator, which will turn this from sewer to Graywater, so you don't have to go into your house. I'm not sure, I might have a slide in here later on, we'll see. But this portion of the project, all this under the house, section, I really recommend make sure you have a licensed plumber to do this portion. Another thing to keep in mind of how this system will differ from a laundry system is a bathroom system will require a permit from your local enforcing agency, which is going to be typically the building department of whatever city you live in. If you're living in an unincorporated area, it will be usually your local county. And the permitting process has gotten much easier over the last 12 years since the code was first changed. I think I have a picture of a drawing that we submitted for. It can be a computer generated drawing from a CAD program, or it can be a hand drawn sketch. It doesn't have to be the most advanced architectural level, but it just needs to be enough to convey what's happening to the building department so they know that you're using the right parts, it's being utilized in the correct way. And so I do recommend having a professional help with this portion of it. But the outside plumbing portion, this could definitely be done by a homeowner. And so the way the system works is you're just using the gravity to get the water to each part of the system to be able to irrigate your trees. And so if you see these little orange boxes, these are the outlet covers and also the flow splitters. So I'm gonna skip ahead to one slide. And so if you notice here in this picture where I was mentioning where the three-way valve will have an electronic actuator, it's this little guy right here. So you can mount this it's basically a little electric servo which will mount to the three-way valve right here on your house. This little guy right here. Sure. And then, so instead of having to go and turn that, you have a little servo that mounts to that three-way valve with a little switch in your bathroom. Sorry, this picture's a little blurry. This little switch will be mounted in the bathroom. Typically, we install it under the vanity sink. And that way, if you are, typically people will turn the three-way valve when they're cleaning out the bathroom. So if they're using some tile scrub to clean out the grout in the bathroom, or there's any other, let's say someone's dyeing their hair and they don't want any of that hair dye to go in the garden, you'll flip that switch, send that wash to the sewer, then you can flip it back for the next shower and send it back out to the garden. And so one of the parts that makes the branch drain system work are these either called a double L in the plumbing world, or a flow splitter is just the kind of common name to it. And if you notice, there's this little white threaded PVC cap, typically 1 inch. And the reason why you have this little cap in here is, if we're going to go up here, so when you have this all in place, you cannot really see if the water is flowing in the correct direction equally on either side. And if you look at this section right here where my mouse pointer is you can see the little cap is off. It's right here. And so when you're installing a system, if you notice, all the pipes are exposed. So you finish putting your pipes in, and then you could turn on a fixture inside the house, let the water flow, and then by having this open, you can check the flow to make sure that water is flowing equally on either side. And then if the water is not flowing correctly, typically in these branch drain system, this little fitting right here can be left unglued. And the reason why you would do that is by leaving this unglued, if the water is not flowing on either side evenly, you can take that unglued fitting and just turn it ever so slightly and get your flow going in the way you want. And it's hard to sell this picture, but you can see there's a little brick right here. Once we have our flow just where we want, we will put a brick underneath the flow splitter, and that helps to hold the pipe in place to maintain that correct flow. And then you have, just like in the lawn landscape system, you have a cover over the outlet, so roots aren't going to grow inside of the pipe. Typically in a branch drain system, the water will usually only split, usually no more than about 3 or 4 times, because by the time you get to a 4th and 5th split, you're getting very, very little water, and it gets much more difficult to manage the sort of the gravity flow of the water. So what you're seeing in this picture, you can get away with a few more mulch basins, but this is typically what you can expect from a typical gravity system. What I love about the simplicity of these systems, the one drawback is you're usually not able to irrigate quite as many plants. But in certain scenarios, this is one thing I always like to think of every project as sort of like a mystery to be solved. What's the best technique to fit with that site? Some sites it's a laundry system, some sites it's a branch drain system, some sites it's a more advanced pump, and there's basically a system for every garden, for every homeowner, for every needs. And I always love the challenge of figuring out what's the best way to tackle every particular situation. So just because it works in this scenario may not work somewhere else, and vice versa. So always keep that in mind. Don't feel like if one of these systems doesn't work, Graywater is not possible for you. There's always a solution. So let's keep it moving. A lot of slides to get to. So here's a little infographic of kind of what I just mentioned. You have your flow splitter covered up with a mulch basin, your different outlets, just kind of conveying the same information in a different way. So here is another project that we had completed several years ago. You can see the main pipe coming from the house with our main flow splitter right here. And so the main flow split, basically you're separating these two sections. So they're each getting 50% of the water coming from the shower. This is usually the most important one. And it's going to kind of help to kind of get the major kind of branches of the system kind of designated. And so once you have, this is 50% and this is 50%, each one of these will designate a 50% split in each one. That was not the best way to describe it. My math is awful. But so then this one's basically going to be what, 25%, and actually this will actually be more like 5% because it's 25% split between all of these ones too. So yeah, my terrible math is showing. This is that same garden right here. It's after the mulch has been showing. So the beauty of this system is all that pipe is underground. You don't see it. From the naked eye to a person coming in your house, a Graywater system is going to look just like any typical irrigation system. So you don't have to worry about having your garden not look any more lush or attractive than any garden, which is a typical potable water. So you're not giving up anything in terms of quality or appearance in your garden. You're just getting the benefit of using less water and keeping all that water on site. So pros, very simple, no moving parts, inexpensive, no electricity, no specialized parts. Basically all the parts for a branch drain system, except for the three valve you can buy from a pool supply store, is basically just the actuator is the only thing that's kind of a specialized part. But even that is not all that difficult to get. And so the cons of a L2L system is you're a little bit more limited in how you can configure your irrigation system, because unlike a laundry system, you have the benefit of a pump. You could send it to a wider variety of plants. In a branch drain system, you're basically limited by the ability to get gravity to get the water to where you need it. It can be a little bit more labor intensive because it's a little bit more trenching, a little bit more kind of tweaking of the pipe to get it to kind of feed, to get the gravity feed to just work just right. You can't really install it in a property if it's a very flat garden or the backyard is higher than the house. But in that situation, I usually, instead of saying, oh, there's no Graywater, to look for other solutions. Maybe they're going to do a laundry system, or maybe they do a rainwater system. So don't get too discouraged if one of these systems doesn't work. There's always one approach that will work for your garden. Okay, so now I'm going to switch over to discuss a pumped bathroom system. And
Alan,
in this picture,
sorry to interrupt. I just want to give you a heads up. We've got about 5 or 10 more minutes.
all right, let's get jamming.
You got it.
So here, this picture I borrowed from my buddy Lee over at Graywater Corp. He's down at LA. He does fantastic work. This is a really great, simple pump system that he has configured. And I want to make sure I give him credit for using this photo. So very similar to the system we just looked at with the branch drain. So you have your main line coming out of your house with our throughway valve. And in this scenario, instead of that just going into the garden through pipes that are split, you have that water flow right into this little basin. And then inside this basin, you have typically a 1/2 horsepower pump with a very simple float switch. And as someone takes a shower, it's gonna fill up. It's important to remember this is not a storage tank. It's what's called a surge tank. So it's only big enough to catch that water off of a shower and then immediately pump into the garden. It's not storing it at all. It's basically going to be in that basin for usually a matter of just a few moments. So this is typically usually about 30 gallons. And so someone takes a shower, water kicks on, it fills. The float switch kicks on and then sends that water out in your garden. So very, very simple pumped system. And the beauty of this is you get the benefit of a pump without too much complexity. And we'll get to a chance. We'll show you a more complex system. So this is a copy of. Remember, I was mentioning these systems. Even a branch drain system is going to require a permit. Even a simple pump system like this is going to require a permit, and even in advance. Anytime you're changing any part of the plumbing under the house, you will require a permit. This is just an example of a permit application that we have used in the past. Things you're going to want to see on a permit is a site plan showing the whole property above. And then they want to see where the throughway valve is located, where the basin is located, and where your backwater valve is located. So these are kind of the information they want to provide, and then showing where the graywater piping will be modified. So that's basically all this document is. It looks a little bit more daunting than it is. You can do this with even existing plans. Just do a red line version of it too. Okay, so here is a more advanced pump system. So this is a system from a manufacturer that we use. And I don't want to promote any one system, but this is a system called from Waternew. There's a whole variety of systems out there depending on the client's budget. So this system has, similar to the one we looked at above, there's a pump very down far at the bottom of this basin. And how this system differs than the one we just saw in the previous picture is this has a much more advanced filtration system. This has a water meter, which is mounted right here. It has different sensors and check valves, which allow you to have a controller, which can designate what zones are getting water. Right here, we have a potable water makeup. So if you're on vacation or you're not taking enough showers to meet the watering needs of the garden, you can have a potable water makeup. And if you notice, there's a little air gap right here, so there's no cross contamination. So the way this system works, you can't quite, you can see it in this picture, but you have this pipe right here, which comes from the house. And then as it enters into the tank, it goes through a little filter right here, flows to the bottom of the tank. The bottom of the tank has a pump kicks on, and then it goes out to the garden through this purple pipe right here. So same concept as the one we saw in that previous picture, just using a little bit more automation, a little bit more flexibility in terms of how you configure things. This kind of system absolutely needs to be installed by a licensed plumber, and not only a licensed plumber, but a licensed plumber or licensed installer with specific graywater installation experience. And then so this side of the system is your sewer connection. So that way, when this, or if it ever overflows, or there's no electricity or more gray water being produced than the system can handle, the water will flow back into the gutter. This also has a self-cleaning filter, so you don't have to clean the filter yourself. And this little guy here is the dirty filter water backwash right there. And this is another system from Rewater that does a very similar approach. Here's another schematic of how that tank works. I'm going to fly through these because we're running out of time. So once you get through the filter and the pump, this is typically how the irrigation is going to be used. This is all inline drip. It's purple in color to designate that it's non-potable water. This is what it looks like before the mulch and plants have been added. There is a little swell over here too, which catches water from the rainwater tank in the back. But this is the type of irrigation you can expect to use with those kinds of advanced pump systems. The beauty of those advanced pump systems, why I like them, is because you can use this type of drip irrigation, which is very similar to a potable drip irrigation. So the beauty of this is homeowners can use a graywater system and then have the water act like a regular potable water. So you can run drip line, you can irrigate, I mean, sometimes dozens, hundreds of plants in the garden. So it offers you a wide variety of configurations. You can have multiple zones. Irrigation is very easy to install. It's installed just like a regular net-of-fin drip irrigation system. It's one of the big pluses to these kinds of advanced systems. Here's a little close-up of those irrigation lines at where this is a picture of us right before we covered it with soil and mulch. Because this is all, like we said earlier, needs to be all subsurface irrigation, so there's no human contact. This is just another brand. This is made by Flow Tender. I'm not saying any one of these systems are better than the other, but just showing you there's a wide variety of different manufacturer options out there. This is also another Irrigray system. And we're going to go into water storage solutions for rainwater, but we are going to run out of time pretty soon, so I'm going to go through these very quick. So for a rainwater system, in a residential situation, you are basically catching all your rainwater basically off of your roof gutters. And so this is a simple infographic showing the major components of a residential rainwater capture system. You have your tank right here, you have your leaf guard, you have your overflow, you have your pump, and you have your conveyance pipes. There is a rain tank for every type of size, color, application you could possibly imagine. So I'm going to go through a whole host of them that you can see here. This is a metal tank with a plastic bladder. This is a wooden tank with a plastic bladder. This is a ferro cement style that you see in a lot of, you don't see as much in the United States. You'll see it quite often. You'll see it in Asia. You'll see it in Africa. You'll see it in Australia, South America, basically anywhere besides the United States and Europe. Actually, one of my favorite ways of doing it, because this kind of tank, if done right, will basically last forever. And they're very resilient. The plastic won't break down. A very fantastic option. Here's another version of it. You'll see these in Thailand. These are these really cool ferro cement ones that are really beautiful, kind of made to look like a big pot. And they are very traditionally found. These are found in Southeast Asia. I wish I could build ones in my house. I think these are awesome. And these will last forever and look very beautiful. So this is just some different versions of that same style tank. Another style that people ask quite a bit about is, can they put a tank underground? Yes, you can. These types of systems, even though they do, are very space conscious, because you can put a garden over it or have other infrastructure over the top of it, are quite expensive, but they are an option if you don't want to have an above ground tank. This is another below ground tank that is a modular style. So they're basically like giant milk crates that you can put together, and then you cover it with one of these rubber liners like a giant Christmas present. And then that void ends up being just a big open area to catch rainwater that you can then use and pump out into your garden. Here's an underground cement vault type tank. And I'm only showing this just to show there's just an endless options for a rain tank. So if one doesn't suit your interest, there's basically a tank, a style, a configuration, a material for almost any type of house or project. These are really cool ones too. They're called these slimline tanks. These are fantastic, especially in San Jose or other urban areas where you don't have large lots to put in a big round tank. These slimline tanks can go along a building, fit in very narrow spaces. Lots of times you're limited by what kind of tank you can use based on how big your gate is, because you might have a big backyard, but you might have a very small gate entrance, and then you can't get that big tank in there because you've got a small gate because the houses are kind of tight together. So this is another fantastic option, are these slimline tanks. And this is another cool tank made by a company, and it's designed, Water Hog is named the company, and they're designed to fit in between floor or wall joists. And they are, I think they're like, they are 11.5 inches to fit a 12-inch on center beam. So these are a really fantastic options. This is one we did for a deck a couple years back. And this is us kind of putting them under the 2x6 boards in the deck. And then when it's all done, you can't even see the tanks. The tanks are taking up this whole area right here completely. It's a very small backyard, and they're able to get a pretty decent size storage capability without taking up any space in their home. So this was a really great option for them. Another cool project, it's actually a project we're working on right now in San Francisco. In this system is actually designed to capture moisture from fog. And how this works is fog will pass through and it will hit this little netting. As the netting kind of builds up little droplets of water from the fog moisture, as the droplets get bigger and bigger, the weight of the droplet will fall off the net. It'll land on this little gutter unit here. And then from that gutter unit, it falls down into, this is actually just a test unit. So I know it doesn't look the most attractive, but if we're using it just to test how much water this building is going to get, and then we're going to build a huge one to cover the entire roof. But this picture kind of demonstrates sort of how this technology works. And what's great about it, it's basically like a passive water harvesting unit. So it'll catch that water, go down in this little funnel. This little guy right here is actually just one of it's a water flow meter that connects this little wire here, and this is our little wireless. We can look at it and see how much water it's producing. This is a great option if you're living in a foggy area, especially in San Francisco or Pacifica or anywhere along the coast in California where fog is happens quite often. And this is a great way to be filling your tanks up in the summertime when you're not getting that winter. Unlike a regular summer, you're only getting water in the winter and drawing it down in the summer. This is a way to get water year round. So if you live in a foggy area, this is a really fantastic. This technology was commonly used down in Chile and Peru, where they get a lot of high mountain fog events with very little precipitation. And this technology has been used literally for thousands of years. So we're kind of readopting this sort of indigenous technology. So really cool way another way you can catch rainwater. This is another system that we installed on the side of a house, it's just called a wet conveyance system. A wet conveyance system just means that the pipe, as it leaves the house, is going to go underground. So if your tank is further away from your house and you can't go directly in, this is just another option. Liz, if I go anytime, please cut me off if you're ready to get into questions. Just let me know. Nice. I do want to at least make sure I get to this slide, because these are tanks to please don't if you have anything like this at your house, I really recommend finding a way to modify it. Some of the main reasons why I dislike some of these is the clear ones are going to have really bad algae problems. These two right here. A wooden tank like this, unless there's always water in it, the wood is going to shrink and move and no longer be watertight. So this is not a great option. These blue barrels, I know these are fantastic. It's a reused material, but they are difficult to scale up into a larger size. And it's usually the 55-gallon drum will fill up so quick and then get used so quickly that it's great for proof of concept. But in terms of being able to be like something you can really, really offset your water in your home, it's not going to do all that much. So I try to steer people away from doing these type of systems. And another one you see I try to get people to avoid are doing these bladder type tanks. We've put in a couple of these in the past, and they just have a whole host of issues between the bladder tank moving, not being able to keep the inlet and overflow in the correct position, because once it fills, it can move. So these are just options I typically try to get people to avoid. Liz, can I keep going, or do you want me to go to questions?
I'd say if there are some key slides that you want to be sure to uplift, yeah. I'm happy to give you a couple more minutes, and then let's go to Q&A.
I appreciate it. So, one question I often get is, or a couple questions that pertain to this is, one, how much water is it possible to get? And this is kind of a baseline. You expect in a roof of, I'm sorry, losing my train of thought. So in a 1-inch rain event on 1,000 square foot roof, you can expect about 600 gallons. Most homes in this area in San Jose are going to be around the 1,500 to just under 1,000 square foot range. So, and even in a drought year where maybe we're only getting, maybe 5 to 8 inches of rain, you can easily get anywhere between 7,000 to 10,000 gallons of water. So many times people say to me, "Oh, we don't get enough rain to make it worth it to put in a rain tank in California." And I always say that is the reason to do a system, not the reason not to do it. And even in a drought year, you can easily collect several thousand gallons of water. So anyone who ever tells you it does not make sense to put in a rainwater system just does not quite know what they're talking about. So this is a great piece of information to ever use, not use it against them, but just show people that, yes, it makes sense. Yes, this is a feasible option to consider. So don't let the fact that we live in California mean not to do a rainwater system. That is reason to do a rainwater system. And that is my soapbox for the evening. We can go to questions, and maybe I can scan through some of these as I'm answering questions. Liz, off to you.
Nicely done, Alan. Definitely a whole lot to cover. Yeah, but really well done. I have to say,
I try to cram a lot in there. And if this slideshow will be available to anyone, so if anyone wants to reread it, totally check it out. You can always email me, and I can answer any questions. We can answer some too right now.
absolutely. Yeah, well done. Thank you so much. So currently, a lot of the questions that we have in the chat are directed to Graywater.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so first things first, we have somebody who has their washing machine not necessarily next to an outside wall, and we have somebody who has their washing machine on a second story. How would you, are they still applicable for Graywater?
That's a good question. So if the washing machine is in the center of the house, typically what we do in those scenarios, instead of going directly out the exterior wall, we will usually go through the floor, and then we go through the crawl space, and then go laterally through the crawl space out either a vent, or we do a small core hole through the concrete or the stucco. So instead of going right at the wall, you're basically using your crawl space. If you're on a concrete slab foundation and you're in the center of the house, there's probably not a lot you can do, unfortunately. But if you do have a crawl space, that's a fantastic way to do it, is just go right to the crawl space.
Nice, thank you.
And then the other question was, well, Rami, I'm sorry.
No, I think you nailed it. Well, the other question was around if it's not next to an exterior wall, but it is just a matter of moving pipe throughout your house, and as long as it's within that 50 feet or 100 feet.
Exactly. That is the one. Number two is you lose a little bit of that pumping ability just to get in the crawl space, but usually it's not much more than 20 feet or so.
Nice. Let's see. So if somebody has a drip system that is already installed in their yard near where the washing machine drain is located, can this be hooked up to the Graywater system, or will they need to install a separate trench system?
One thing I always try to remind people too, so it's basically a laundry system is not going to really work in conjunction with your other irrigation. So consider like it's working in conjunction with it. So if there's already existing irrigation lines, you can keep those in place, and then you could run this near those lines to the same plants. And then basically, if you're getting a good amount of Graywater, so let's say if that zone was previously running, let's say it was running 3 days a week for those particular plants, that zone can either be turned off. Maybe you only turn that zone back on when there's not enough Graywater for that area, or you say I'm only going to water this 1 day a week, and then other days of the week it's just going to get Graywater. So I would say think of it as just like working in conjunction with it as additional water. Or you can use I also tell people to consider Graywater as like one of the zones in your backyard. Say under control, you have zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, zone 4, and then instead of this being zone 5, it's just zone 5, slash kind of Graywater zone. And so that way you're maybe not replacing something, you're just kind of offsetting it and just adding an additional zone to it. But it's really important that I can't specify enough is do not run your laundry machine through your existing drip line. It's gonna definitely clog. You're gonna get built up of Graywater in there. It's not gonna flow correctly. So they have to be dealt with differently.
Nice, good clarification. Thank you. And so when we are talking about diverting that water into the landscapes, when we're talking about mulch basins and strategically placing mulch basins around the drip line of a tree, as a tree grows and that drip line moves out, what should be done about that?
Yeah, totally. So basically, as the tree grows, you could just dig your mulch basin just bigger and bigger. So almost like if you look at like if you cut a branch off a tree, you have rings of a tree. Think of it like as a tree gets bigger and bigger and bigger, you have more rings. So as a tree gets bigger, you just dig your mulch basin a little bigger and bigger. So you can just maybe dig one more section around the edge to make it a little bit larger, add some more mulch. And as you're making the mulch basin hole bigger, you also want to move the outlet pipe back a little bit. So maybe you cut like maybe 12 inches off the pipe, and it becomes shorter and shorter, and it moves the outlet. So you want the outlet to be in the drip line of the tree. So the drip line of the tree is basically sort of the outer edge of where the smaller kind of foliage of the tree is. So that's kind of where the mulch basin should be installed. So over time, I'd say maybe every 2 to 3 years, you could just increase the size of the mulch basin. If it's a younger, fast-growing tree, maybe you might move it every 1 to 2 years. It really depends on how vigorous the tree is growing. But it's the beauty of a laundry system, this type of system. It's so easy to augment the mulch basins and make changes over time.
Nice, great question and great response. Thank you.
And one thing too, I mean to cut you off there, but just to fill, I always think too, if you're trying to figure out how many trees you should irrigate, if you're unsure, I always say start with less trees, and then you can always add mulch basins later. So let's say you start with, I'm only going to water 4 or 5 trees, and you notice, oh wow, this is quite a bit of water for these trees. Let me just add another mulch basin, or et cetera, versus trying to put in 15 mulch basins and then realizing, oh wow, none of these trees are getting quite enough water. Now you got to turn some off and scale it back down. It's a lot easier to scale up the system than to remove things and then have wasted time and labor to take off the mulch basin. So always err on less plants and add more later.
Nice, good advice.
Sorry.
Can gray water be stored in tanks?
No, and I get this question gets asked a lot too. So for a lot of reasons, when you store the gray water in a tank, that water will go septic almost immediately. I mean, that water will sit there. If you put that water in the morning and come back especially on a hot day like this, that water will become absolutely putrid in just a matter of a couple hours. And there's no real benefit to it because the demand for water in your landscape is always going to be significantly more than the gray water supply you have coming from the house. So it's no added benefit to storing it. So because you're going to be getting why store that water when you're going to be getting another load of laundry in 2 or 3 days and another load of laundry 2 days after that. So just as you get that water, use it up, and then there's always more water coming. So there's no benefit to storing it. And besides the part of it's going to get disgusting.
Yeah, thank you. Looks like Rachel's looking for a little bit of clarification around the diverter valve. She asks, do you need to physically turn the valve at the right time to make sure that you just divert rinse water?
If you really, really wanted to be to lose the least amount of water possible, yes, but that means you'd have to literally stand next to your machine and turn it. I just, if I know that load's going to have bleach in it, or if I'm washing baby diapers or something like that, I don't want that to go in. I just right before I close the lid to the washing machine, turn the handle then, and then it's a lot easier than having to stand there and switch it over mid-load after the rinse. I mean, you could do that, but I say turn it before the load, and it just makes it much easier.
Thank you. This is an interesting question. Are there systems that you're aware of to harvest shower water to use for toilet flushing?
Yeah, there's really kind of only one that manufacturer that we put in a couple of them. So it's made by a company called Aqualoop. And so in that little 30-gallon tank, actually they use 2 tanks. They have what they call a bioreactor tank and then a storage tank. So the bioreactor tank just uses little plastic media, and that plastic media basically just allows for little microbes to grow, and then those little microbes just basically break down all the soap, and you basically use a little fish tank aerator that just sends water into these little microbes and all that, just like a compost system. If having proper oxygen in the compost system is going to have more microbes, so that's basically the same way this system works. And we use these systems when a client either has an existing lawn that they really, really want to keep, or they want to maintain some kind of an overhead spray. Lots of times they want to use a lawn. So, okay, you have to rip out your lawn, put in subsurface, and then reinstall a lawn over that. Well, that's just the cost and effort is just too much. So it's okay if you really are, insist on keeping a lawn and don't want to rip it out and you want to use overhead spray, you can put in one of these. And actually the cost is not much more than the other pump systems that I showed you. Another benefit of doing this system is once that system has gone to the bioreactor, you can use that water for toilet flushing and for laundry like the person just asked. And so you can, and the beauty of that is in the wintertime, a lot of people will turn their gray water system off because their plants don't need all the extra water. So with this system, you can be using that gray water for toilet flushing even in the winter. So that way you're still able to utilize that water. And in some instances, when we're doing these kind of systems, we even have the rainwater plumb for indoor use. So that way, so most rainwater systems, you're filling the tank one time in the winter, drawing it down one time in the summer. So you only get one fill, one draw. So you're only cycling through it one time a year. Whereas if you can plumb that system for indoor toilet flushing and laundry, you can cycle through that rain tank maybe 4 or 5 plus times a year. So let's say in a lifespan of a rain tank, let's say if you have that rain tank for 20 years, on a typical system, you're filling it and drawing it down 20 times in the whole lifespan of that tank. Whereas if you're using it for indoor use, you might be able to cycle to that same tank maybe a couple hundred times in that same lifespan of that tank. So in that whole, so you're kind of reducing the like embodied energy of that tank because you're getting significantly more use out of it over the lifespan of the system. So I definitely like to find ways where we can use that water for indoor use and for toilet flushing and for laundry, for gray water or rainwater. So yeah, so the answer is there are a lot of options for doing that, and we've got them permitted and got them accepted from cities. So it's becoming more commonplace and more accepted.
Nice. Oh, that's exciting.
But if someone's going to go that route, it's really, really critical that they are engaging with a licensed plumber, someone who's certified in gray water and rainwater installation, and that's a really important thing to make sure it's done right. So you're not exposing anyone to any water that's people can interact with and touch. So
Great, thank you. We've had a couple of people ask about a specific detergent brand. I know you mentioned some of the key ingredients to avoid. A few folks have specifically asked about the Kind liquid detergent brand. I did a quick Google search of what the 5 ingredients are. And one of the first ones is sodium dodecyl sulfate, and it says it's plant derived. What's your opinion on that particular brand, or if there is sodium, but it says it's plant derived?
That's a good question. I don't know. But I mean, if it says sodium in there, I mean, I'm definitely not I struggled in chemistry class in school, but if it says so, I mean, it literally has sodium twice in that same. So I mean, that makes it a little bit, that would lead me to think that it does have some sodium, whether it's naturally derived or synthetic. I would say I would err on the side of either do some more research on what that specific product is, or choose something different. And that's just me being cautious. I don't know that product. I don't know that specific chemical, so I don't want to speak out of turn. So my thing is, if I'm never unsure, always err on the side of avoid it if you don't know.
Nice.
So I would just need to do more research. One thing I say too, if it's liquid and it's clear, that's probably about I'd say 80% chance it's going to be gray water compatible. Because usually the things that are adding things you want to avoid are all the color dyes or all the boron to make it a powder. So if it's clear and there's no color in it, that's usually you're avoiding a lot of things that they normally add to it. But just because it's clear and liquid doesn't mean you shouldn't do more research into it. So always look at the label. One thing I recommend people do, so there's a website called the Cosmetic Database, which is a breakdown of like all the chemicals like in any household product from soaps, shampoos, makeup products, cleaning products. You can go on there and you can type in almost any household product and it'll tell you what it's derived from, who makes it, when it came out, is it toxic, is it safe for kids, is it septic safe, gray water safe. So that's a really great resource, is the Cosmetic Database. I'm pretty sure I have it on my resource link. If not, I can send it out when I send the link out to everybody.
Yeah, great resource. I just looked that up. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's by like Revlon put it out. I'm guessing it was from a lawsuit. They probably just closed in there.
And then we actually had a follow-up question too around sodium-based water softeners. And my understanding is you can switch to potassium-based water softener, but I'm curious if you have any additions to that.
Yeah, and that's always a question too. So definitely a bunch of different schools of thought. Some people say that, in a properly functioning, even a sodium-based water softener, by the time it's gone through its softening action, there should be very little residual sodium left in the water by the time it gets out to the plants. But if you're nervous about there being even residual sodium, it's going to, you know, potentially bioaccumulate around a tree and kill a tree, then switch over to a potassium-based water softener. Potassium-based water softeners are going to be they're quite a bit more expensive than the sodium-based ones, unfortunately. But I mean, you're talking maybe $20 a bag of the sodium to maybe like $100 a bag of the potassium. You're only buying potassium a couple times a year, so you may spend maybe, you know, $200 more a year with potassium. You know, that's a lot of money to some people, so it kind of just depends on everyone's scenario. There are non-pellet based softeners, like ones by a company called Water Nouveau, and that just uses like a cartridge style water softener. So there's no actual potassium or sodium based like salt additives to add to it. So there's a whole host of people who have different schools of thoughts on the cartridge based ones. You're still buying cartridges, so there's still cost to that, like you're buying sodium. So the water softener one, there's pros and cons to all of them. So there's no kind of perfect silver bullet. But if you already have one, the easiest one would be to switch over to potassium based for sure.
Mm-hmm. Nice, thank you. We've got 2 more questions, so I think we can get these answered. Somebody's asking about a slab foundation where they have their washer in the middle of their house. Would you suggest a pump system?
Man, you're kind of out of luck if you're on a concrete slab. I hate saying that, but one thing I tell people: so if you're on a concrete slab and you can't do gray water, then just explore rainwater solutions. You know, so because the concrete slab won't affect your ability to collect rainwater. So just because gray water won't work, there's always another solution that you can go for. So just because you can't do that doesn't mean you can't have other strategies for saving water.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd say.
They went on to ask if they could pump it up like through their attic.
I would really avoid that because you're gonna need you're gonna need to pump the washing machine water to another pump, then pump into the house.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I always try to avoid a scenario you pump from a pump to a pump, because then just you're adding just more complexity. There's more things to check. There's more things that go wrong. There's more electricity. I knew a guy who just he moves the laundry machine outside, and because he couldn't run outside, so I'll just move the whole machine outside. I'm like that's a solution. Actually, he painted his machine black and then fill the water in the morning, let the sun heat the water, and then use the gray water outside. I mean, that's not for everybody, obviously. But the only reason I bring that up is there's a lot of creative solutions out there. So just because one thing won't work, like, you know, have some fun with it. Gardening should be fun. If gardening is not fun, people won't do it. So find fun, creative solutions that are still safe. Don't do anything that's going to be unsafe. Because if you do things that are unsafe or look kind of awkward, people are going to seem like that's why I'm not doing that, because look at this guy. He's got this crazy looking system. So make it if you're going to do something that's different, try to make it work, make it look good, make it look presentable, so it encourages other people to do it. So that's how we got to, you know, you want to have that cool looking garden that's still green and lush and water conscious. That's how we're gonna sell more people. Not sell them monetarily, but convince them to do this. You know, because it's gotta look good, it's gotta work well, and so those are key. There's always a solution out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thinking outside the box. I love it.
Absolutely, 100%.
We have one last question here. Laura leads with great presentation. Thank you. And then goes on to ask if you can share an estimated price range for a bathroom gray water system for a single story home.
So I would say on the more simple pumped systems, you could probably get away with a system for maybe, you know, on the low end, maybe from anywhere from like 7,000 to 8,000 to 10,000. And the main cost is going to be changing the plumbing under the house, because if you're going to bring in a licensed plumber, and that also includes getting a permit and having someone draft up the design. So you've got a couple $1,000s, and I shouldn't say, it depends on what city you live in. Anywhere from $500 to $1,500 for the permit designs. The plumber and the plumbing materials, he's going to be a couple $1,000s for that, and then the pump system. So that's of a simple pump system. You're going to be in that $7,000 to $10,000 range. The smart systems with more advanced sensors and controllability, those systems are going to be probably, I would say, in the more the $15,000 to $20,000 range. And one thing I tell people, sometimes I tell people like, whoa, that's a lot of money for these systems. And it is a lot of money. And one thing I recommend, if you want to cut down on those costs, a couple of things you can do is try to install the bathroom systems during a major remodel, during a new construction. Or let's say you live in a house built in the 40s or 50s, and like, man, we still got these old galvanized or cast iron pipes. They work, but we're kind of ready to finally upgrade to an ABS pipe, and get this done because it's going to fail at some point. Perfect time to do a greywater system because you're already paying to have this work done. You've already got a plumber there. You're already under the house. You're already ripping things out. Then you could always put the greywater pipes in. Even if you're not ready to spend the money on putting the pump and filter unit or redoing your landscape or changing your irrigation, you can make your plumbing greywater ready and have the three-way valve put in, have the plumbing parts all put in and done. And then at any time, once you're ready to put in the actual filter unit, you can do that at any time down the road because your plumbing has at least been modified. So those are some ways you can cut down on costs, kind of piggyback on costs and labor and materials by doing as part of a larger project. So, because that people do get a little sticker shock when they hear that they're in the 10,000. There's some really advanced systems. If you're doing, we put in systems where it's a greywater system with a rain tank, and we're doing indoor plumbing and redoing the landscape, and those projects can easily get in the $30,000 to $40,000, $50,000 plus range. But I also tell people too, if you're going to redo your whole landscape front and back and do all this, even that work can still be costly. So, basically instead of seeing greywater system as an added cost, I see it as you're offsetting a cost of what you would have paid a lot of money for even a traditional water system, which is potable water. Even a potable water irrigation system is still expensive. Mm-hmm. So just instead of budgeting for a potable water system, you're just budgeting for a greywater system. So if you're already in the market to redo your landscape, let's say you just refinance the home and you're gonna, hey, let's update our landscape. So that's a great time to, instead of just updating with a potable water system, update with a greywater system. So just kind of match it up with other projects in the house. And that's a great way to cut down on costs.
Nice. Well, Alan, with that, we're at 7. We've had a couple folks in the chat and the Q&A. Thank you for your presentation. And I too want to thank you for your expertise and knowledge that you brought. You covered a whole heck of a lot and you did it really well. So thank you.
And if people have more questions, people can email me. My email is just alan@baynaples.com. It's really easy. We also post stuff on our Instagram. So if people want to see us do these installations or, follow along with some of the stuff we do, you can watch our Instagram page and kind of see, like, I'll do a lot of lives, like for under house or doing the plumbing work. I'll kind of do a Instagram live to really kind of show people and kind of educate people a little bit. So if people want to learn more, those are some ways you can learn more and see what we do.
That's fantastic. Thank you. And again, we'll be sending a follow-up email with all of these resources, Alan's contact, the presentation, the recording. I hope that this has tremendously helped all of your journey through water conservation. And thank you again. I'm glad you all were here. We're going to sign off now. Have a great night, everybody. For our panelists, I did send a debrief link in case folks are available to join for a quick wrap. And otherwise, I hope to see you all again soon.
Thank you.
Take good care. Have a good night. Bye now.